thrown from a moving stagecoach to die. A cowboy carried her home and gave her. The boot was still on her left foot. That's what I noticed first. One boot. Calfskin dark brown, the heel worn flat on the inside, edged the way a woman's heel goes when she favors one side walking. She was face down in the buffalo grass about 40 yards off the road, and the boot was still on, and the other foot was bare, and I didn't know yet whether she was breathing. I'd heard the coach go past maybe an hour before. Hard to say exactly. I'd been working the fence line along the south draw, stapling wire back where the elk had pushed through, and I heard it. The 4 horses running hard, not the usual road pace but something faster, something that didn't sit right. And then it was gone over the hill and I'd gone back to my staples. Should have paid attention to that sound. My horse, a good blue roan I called Rafter, smelled her before I saw her. He locked up, ears high, and turned his head southwest off the trail, and I followed his nose. I always trusted that horse more than I trusted most men. I got down slow. My knees aren't what they were. 61 years old that spring, and the right one had been grinding like a mill wheel since the Comanche trouble back in '74. I went to her on foot through the grass, and I crouched down, and I put 2 fingers to the side of her throat, and she was warm and there was a pulse, shallow, fast, but there. I rolled her over careful. Her face was a map of what had happened. Road dirt ground into the left cheekbone. A cut above her eye that had already gone dark at the edges dried. Her bottom lip split. She was maybe 30, maybe a little past it, hard to say through the damage, dark hair come loose from its pins and spread in the grass around her. She had on a traveling dress, green wool, and it was torn at the shoulder and filthy all the way down one side. Her hands were scraped raw, both of them, the way hands get when you've tried to catch yourself on gravel. I looked back at the road, looked both ways. Nothing, no coach coming back, no rider, just the wind coming off the plain and a hawk working a thermal high up. So I picked her up. I'm not a small man, but I'm not a large one either. Lean mostly. But she wasn't heavy, lighter than she should have been, which told me something about the weeks before this. And I got her up in my arms and walked back to Rafter, and he stood for it, good horse, while I got her positioned across the saddle on her belly. I walked us home, 3 miles. Took the better part of an hour, the ground being rough in spots, me leading Rafter by the reins and keeping one hand on her back so she didn't slip. The whole walk I kept waiting for her to come around. She didn't. My place isn't much to look at. A log and plank house, 2 rooms, a sleeping loft I haven't used in years on account of the ladder being hard on the knee. A good stone barn, better built than the house because I built the barn first, and by the time I started on the house I was tired. A spring-fed trough, chickens, a kitchen garden that does better than it has any right to in that soil. I've been living there 11 years alone. Before that I had a wife, Cora, and we had 3 years together before the fever took her in the winter of '68. After that, I sold the place we'd had in the valley and bought this 40 acres up on the bench where nobody much came, and I didn't have to look at anything that reminded me of her. I'm not saying that was the right thing to do. I'm just saying it's what I did. 11 years without a woman in the house. You'd be surprised how quickly you lose the habit of considering someone else. Or maybe you wouldn't. Maybe that's just what happens to a man who lets it. I got her inside and onto the cot I kept in the main room for when I was too tired to climb even the 2 steps to the loft. Got her boots off, both of them now. I'd found the other one about 10 yards from where she'd fallen, and covered her with the good quilt, the one Cora had made from flour sacks the second winter we were married. I didn't think about that while I was doing it. I thought about it later. I cleaned the cuts on her face with well water and a piece of cloth I tore from an old shirt. Got the road dirt out as best I could. She flinched when I touched the cut above her eye but didn't wake. Her breathing had steadied some. I built the fire up because even in May the nights on the bench could get down to near freezing, and then I sat in the chair by the window and I waited. She woke up around midnight. I heard her before I saw her move, a sharp intake of breath, the kind that comes with pain arriving all at once. And I was out of the chair before I'd thought about it, and I was at the edge of the cot, and she was trying to sit up with her eyes wide and her hands already out in front of her like she was fending something off. "Easy," I said. "You're inside, you're safe." She looked at me, just looked for a long moment trying to place what she was seeing. "I found you in the grass off the road," I said. "About 3 miles south. You fell from the coach or you were put out of it. I don't know which." Her voice when it came was dry. "Put," she said. That one word sat there between us for a second. All right, I said. I got the tin cup of water I'd set on the side table and I held it out to her. She took it in both hands, those scraped-up hands, and drank it down without stopping. There are men, she said when she'd finished, who'll come looking. I expect so. She looked at me again, measuring, trying to decide something about me. My name is Hester Vane, she said. I was traveling from Cheyenne to Laramie. I had a strongbox, not mine. I was carrying it for a man I worked for. The men on the coach wanted it. When I wouldn't say where it was hidden in the luggage, they opened the door. At speed, I said. At full speed, yes. I nodded. I didn't say anything. Sometimes the silence after a thing like that is the right response. She didn't need me to tell her it was terrible. She knew what it was. The box, I said after a moment. Did they get it? I don't know, a pause, probably. She leaned back against the wall behind the cot, and I could see the effort it cost her, the way she held herself careful around the ribs. I'd wondered about that, the left side. You might have broken ribs, I said. Hard to know without a doctor, and the nearest is in Caldwell, which is 20 miles. I can take you tomorrow if you can sit a horse. I can sit a horse. She said it flat, certain, the way a person says a thing they've been doing since they were 4 years old. Good. I'd figured her for capable, even banged up like she was. There was something in the set of her that told you she wasn't soft. I'll make some broth, I said. You need something in you. She watched me go to the stove, and I felt her watching, that particular kind of attention someone gives you when they're still deciding whether you're safe. I understood it. I didn't mind it. A woman wakes up in a strange man's house in the middle of the night. She's got every right to be measuring him. I made the broth from the bone I'd been simmering since the morning, added some dried onion, poured it into the cup. Brought it back to her. She took it. What's your name? She said, not a question exactly, a demand but a quiet one. Harlan Briggs, I said. I have the 40 acres north of this position, bench land, good spring. I've been here 11 years. She drank the broth, watched me over the rim of the cup. Are you alone here? She said. Yes. Have you been alone the whole 11 years? I looked at her, direct woman, hurt as she was. Yes, I said. She nodded, like that confirmed something she'd already thought. Sleep, I said. We'll figure the rest in the morning. She did. I went back to the chair. She was still there in the morning. I half expected she wouldn't be expected to find the cot empty and the door standing open. But she was there, sitting up when I came down, wrapped in the quilt, her dark hair repinned somehow, neater than the night before. She'd found a way to manage that with those scraped hands, and I didn't ask her about it. Can I use your outhouse? She said. Doors around the back. There's a hook on the inside. She stood up slow, let herself find her balance, walked to the door. Steady, careful but steady. The ribs were giving her trouble. I could see it in the way she held her left arm slightly in, protecting that side, but she wasn't favoring it, obviously, wasn't letting it show more than she had to. I made coffee. I made eggs from the morning's gathering. I cut bread. She came back in and sat at the table like she'd been sitting at my table her whole life, and I put the plate in front of her and the coffee, and she said, "Thank you," and ate without ceremony. Good appetite. Another good sign. We didn't talk much while we ate. There are people you can be quiet with and people you can't, and from the first morning I could tell she was the first kind. She wasn't uncomfortable in the silence, and neither was I, and so we just ate, and the fire popped, and the chickens outside made their morning noise. Tell me about the men, I said when we'd pushed the plates back. She told me 3 of them. She'd boarded the coach in Cheyenne. It was a private stage, not the line, hired by the man she worked for, a land agent named Garfield Pryor who ran an office in Laramie, and the 3 men had been on it already. She thought they were passengers. Somewhere in the first hour, she'd noticed the way they watched the luggage, the way the one in the corner seat kept looking at her specifically. She'd moved the strongbox under her feet and crossed her ankles over it. When they asked me to hand it over, she said, I told them it wasn't mine to hand over. What did they say to that? The tall one said it would be better for me if I cooperated. She looked at her coffee cup. I told him I'd heard that before, and it generally wasn't true. Something in me wanted to smile at that, but I held it down. This wasn't a thing to smile at. Did they hurt you before? One of them grabbed my arm. I scratched his face. A pause. So yes, by the time they opened the door, there was some established bad feeling. She said that last part so dry, so flat, that it took a half-second to land. Established bad feeling. 3 men who'd just thrown a woman out of a moving coach. She said it like she was describing a minor disagreement over supper seating. "They'll come back along this road," I said. "They'll want to know if I'm alive," she said. "If I'm alive, I'm a problem. I saw their faces. I can name them in front of a judge, one of them, the tall one, I've seen before. He works out of Cheyenne, does rough work for a man named Colbert." I knew the name Colbert, not personally, but by reputation. He was the kind of man whose name you heard in certain conversations, the kind of conversation that happened in low voices in the back of saloons. He owned a hotel in Cheyenne and various interests that were not explained in polite company. "So Pryor's box," I said. "Was it something Colbert wanted?" She looked at me, first real surprise I'd seen in her face. "You know the territory," she said. 11 years is long enough to learn who's who." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Pryor has been putting together land deeds, a lot of them. Small ranchers selling out cheap, some willing, some not so willing. The box has the deeds and a ledger. There are names in that ledger of county officials who helped arrange the not-so-willing ones. Colbert's name is in there too, apparently, more than once." I sat with that. "You work for Pryor," I said, "but you're carrying evidence against him to Laramie." "I work for the law office in Laramie that has been building a case," she said. "Pryor thinks I'm his bookkeeper. I've been his bookkeeper for 14 months. She said it straight, looking at me straight. She was a long way past apologizing for what she was. I got up and poured more coffee, stood at the window and looked out at the bench, at the long grass moving in the wind, at Rafter in the corral. "You can stay here until you're fit to ride," I said, "and I'll take you to Caldwell when you are. After that's your business. And if the men come before then we'll deal with that." She was quiet behind me. I turned around. She was looking at me with an expression I didn't quite know what to do with, not soft exactly, not grateful exactly, more like she was revising some estimate she'd made. "You don't know me," she said. "No. I could be lying about all of it." "You could," I said. "People do lie. But you've got the scrapes on your hands and those ribs, and those are real, and nobody takes a fall like that for a lie they made up in the last 12 hours. She was quiet again. "Harlan," she said. It was the first time she'd used my name. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," I said. "Make sure we get you to Caldwell first." They came on the second day. I'd figured the second or third, depending on whether they doubled back or went on to Laramie first and then came back. They came on the second, which meant they doubled back, which meant they were more worried about her being alive than they were about making Laramie with the box. I saw the dust from the bench about 40 minutes before they arrived. 3 riders, like she'd said, coming from the south. I went inside. Hester was at the table with one of my old almanacs, the 1882 one, just reading it because it was there. She looked up. "Company," I said. She stood, didn't ask questions. I handed her the old Remington from the hook by the door, the .44 loaded hammer down. "You know how to use that?" I said. "Point and pull," she said. "I know how." "The loft," I said. "Top of the ladder, you've got a sightline through the front window, the gap in the chinking. Stay there until you hear me call your name. If something goes wrong—" I stopped. "If something goes wrong, I don't stay in the loft," she said. "That's right." She went up the ladder, moving careful on those ribs, but moving. I watched her go, and then I went out to the porch. I had the Winchester, my own, and I leaned it against the wall behind me, not visible from the road, but close. Then I sat on the step, and I took out my belt knife and a piece of leather I'd been working, and I pretended to be a man with nothing on his mind. They came into the yard at a walk, 3 of them, and the first thing I noticed was that the tall one was riding point, which confirmed what Hester had said about him being the one who ran things. He was maybe 40, weathered, with a scar along the left jawline that was old, white, a knife wound from years back. The other 2 were younger, harder looking in the way that meant they'd done rough work long enough that it had stopped costing them anything. "Morning," I said. "Morning," the tall one said. He stopped about 20 feet off, the other 2 flanking him. "We're looking for a woman. Came off the stage 2 days ago, rode south of here. Dark hair, green dress, you see her." I looked at him. I took my time about it. I heard the stage go past, I said, going fast. That's right. She jumped, got spooked, and jumped. We've been worried sick about her. He said it well. Some men can't lie with any weight to it, but this man could. He said it like he believed it, almost. I said. So you haven't seen her? I found a boot in the grass, I said. About 3 miles south off the road, that's all. He looked at the other two, then back at me. The one on his left, youngest of the three, maybe 25, with mean eyes that hadn't learned yet to hide themselves, was already scanning the yard, the house, the barn. Mind if we look around? The tall one said. I do mind, I said. This is my property. A silence. Old man, the mean-eyed one said. You don't want to. He's not talking to you, the tall one said, cutting him off. Then to me, we don't mean any trouble. We're just worried about the woman. Then go look in the grass 3 miles south, I said. That's where the boot is. Another silence. Longer this time. The tall one was doing his calculations, looking at me at the house at what he could and couldn't see. What he couldn't see was the Winchester behind my right leg. What he also couldn't see was that the rifle I'd leaned against the barn wall that morning when I'd started chores, and hadn't yet put away, was now pointing roughly in his direction from between the barn door and its frame, held by Hester Vane, who had quietly come down from the loft and gone out the back, and through the side gate in the time we'd been talking. I heard the creak of the barn door, just slight, and I didn't look at it, didn't give her away. The tall one heard it too. He turned toward the barn. I got a cow that does that, I said. Door creaks, meaning to fix it. He turned back to me. His eyes were different now, smaller, figuring odds. Thank you for your time, he said. Sure, I said. They rode out. I watched them all the way to the road, and then watched the dust of them going north until it thinned and was gone. I went around to the barn. Hester was still at the door, the Remington up, watching the road. I put my hand on the barrel and she lowered it. They'll come back, she said. Tonight or tomorrow, I said, with more probably. She looked at me. The afternoon light was coming through the barn door and it caught the side of her face, the fading bruise, the cut healing over now, and the way she was standing straight, rifle in her hand, not a bit of shake in her. I remember that clearly. How she looked in that moment. Solid. Like somebody who'd decided something a long time ago and hadn't been talked out of it since. We need to go tonight, I said. Get you to Caldwell, put you on the road to Laramie. Oui, she said. I'll ride with you as far as Caldwell. That's 20 miles. I know how far it is. She looked at me for another moment. That same measuring look, but different now. Whatever she'd been looking for, she seemed to have found it, or gotten close enough to it to stop looking. All right, she said. Tonight. We left at dark, no moon yet. I put her on Rafter because he was steadier than my other horse, the bay, who could get spooky on night trails. I rode the bay. We went northwest first, off the main road and onto the upper bench, which added maybe 4 miles but kept us clear of any men who might be waiting on the south road. She rode well. I'd known she would, but it was good to see it confirmed. She kept Rafter at my bay's pace, didn't fight him, let him pick his way over the rough ground. Her left arm was close in to her side still, those ribs, but she rode upright and she didn't complain and she didn't slow us down. We didn't talk much on the ride. There was the sound of the horses and the night insects, and once the far-off yip of coyotes working a draw to the east. The stars were enormous. They always are out there on the bench, away from any town, away from any light. It's one of the things about that place, 11 years, and I never got tired of those stars. Around midnight, we came down off the bench onto the Caldwell Road. Easier going from there. We rode side by side. What will you do, she said, when you go back? Watch for them. If they show up, tell them the truth, you left, gone to Caldwell. And if that's not enough for them? I've handled rough men before, I said. She looked at me sideways in the dark. That's not what I'm asking. I thought about it. If they push it, I'll push back. I'm on my own property. The law in these situations tends to agree with the man who's on his own property. The law in these situations tends to agree with whoever Colbert is paying, she said, not bitter, just factual. She wasn't wrong. Then I'll handle it some other way, I said. She didn't say anything for a bit. Then, I'll send someone back from Laramie. When the case moves forward, and it will move forward, I've got enough to make it move. There'll be men who come out here to take statements. From you, if you're willing. About what you found on the road, about the men who came to your property. I'm willing, I said. It could make things harder for you, before it makes them easier. I've had harder, I said. Another silence, comfortable one. You found me in the grass, she said. Yes. You could have ridden past. I thought about that, the truth of it. I'd had that moment, standing there looking at the shape in the buffalo grass before I'd known she was breathing. I'd had the moment of choice. I could have, I said, but Rafter found you first and I trust that horse. She made a sound that might have been a laugh, quiet, careful on the ribs. A cow whose door creaks, she said. Good thinking, I said, or you thought of it, one of us did. We came into Caldwell just before 2 in the morning. It was quiet, just the horse's hooves on the dirt street and a light in one window down by the feed store where somebody was burning oil late. The livery was at the north end. I knocked and the boy who slept in the loft came down, and I paid him for a fresh horse and the night's stabling of my 2. The hotel was across the street. I walked her over. At the door she stopped, turned around to face me. In the lamplight from inside, yellow, warm, coming through the glass, she looked tired, the way that's honest and not weak, the way that comes after something hard has been survived and the body is starting to take account. She put her hand on my arm, not tentative, just placed it there on my forearm and left it. Harlan, she said. You don't need to say it. I know I don't, she said. I'm going to anyway. She looked at me the way she'd looked at me in the barn that afternoon, but more direct now, no measuring left in it, just clear-eyed, the way a person looks at you when they've already decided and they want you to know they've decided. You're a good man, she said. I've met enough of the other kind to know the difference. I didn't have an answer for that seemed worth giving, so I didn't give one. I'll write, she said, when the case moves, when I know what's happening. All right. And if you're ever in Laramie. I don't go to Laramie much, I said. Maybe start, she said. She squeezed my arm once, let go, and went inside. The ride home was long. 4 hours the back way, the bay tired and me tired, the stars dropping toward the west the way they do in the small hours. I thought about what she'd said, and I thought about what she hadn't said, and I thought about the way she'd looked in the barn with the rifle, and the way she'd ridden, and the way she'd said established bad feeling like she was talking about a minor inconvenience. I thought about Cora. I did that, for the first time in a long time, without it being something that cost me. Just thought about her, and about the years after, and about 11 years on a bench with nobody. The men came back 2 days later, 6 of them, but by then the county deputy from Caldwell had ridden out. I'd stopped there on my way back from dropping Hester and left a written statement, and the deputy had 2 men with him. And when the tall man and his company came into the yard and found 4 armed men on the porch, they went away again and they didn't come back. The case moved the following fall. There were depositions taken in my kitchen, 2 lawyers and a federal marshal around my table. Colbert's operation got unraveled, some of it at least. Those things never go all the way clean, and Pryor ended up in front of a judge. The county officials in the ledger had a bad winter that year. Hester wrote like she said she would. The first letter came in July, forwarded through the Caldwell post office, which was the only address she had for me. And it was a clear, direct letter, the way she talked, laying out what had happened in the case and what would happen next. And at the end of it she said she hoped I was well and that she meant what she'd said at the hotel door. I wrote back. It took me 4 attempts over 3 evenings before I had a letter worth sending, because I am not a man who writes easily, but I got one finished. She came out the following spring. Not for any case business, that was wrapped by then, mostly. She came out because she said she wanted to see the bench land and the spring-fed trough I'd mentioned in one of my letters and the chickens. She stayed a week. She helped me with the kitchen garden, and she cooked things I hadn't had in years. And one evening we sat on the porch after supper and watched the light go off the plane and didn't talk for a long time. On the last evening she said she'd been thinking about Laramie and whether she needed to stay there now that that piece of work was done. She said she'd been thinking about other places. I'm not going to tell you I had an answer ready for that. I'm not that kind of man. But I said something. I can't tell you exactly what, because I'm not much for remembering the exact words of things, only the sense of them. And she looked at me and she nodded and she said, "All right then." She went back to Laramie and settled her affairs, and came back in the fall with 2 trunks and a crate of books and a comment about the loft ladder that had me laughing, actually laughing, which was something I'd lost the habit of, and we fixed the loft ladder that same week. It's been 4 years now. The bench is better with 2 people. I wouldn't have said that once. I'd have said I'd learned to be solitary and that it suited me. But it's one of those things you can't know until you're on the other side of it. Hester knows what she's worth and she knows what I'm worth, and she says the second thing out loud sometimes in a way that I've never quite gotten used to, because nobody much said it to me before her. She says it plain, the way she says most things, without ceremony, but she means it, and I know she means it. I found a woman's boot in the grass, and I carried her home, and somewhere in the months after that I got a life I hadn't expected to have. The boot, the one I found first, the calfskin one with the heel worn on the inside, it's on the shelf in the barn. I put it there and it's been there ever since. Hester knows it's there. She's never asked me to move it. That's the kind of woman she is. She's good. She chose this. She chose me. And out here on the bench in the early morning, coffee on, the light just starting to go pink off the plane, and her voice carrying from inside the house. Some question about the chickens, some daily thing. I know exactly what I've got. I don't take it for granted for 1 minute. Not 1 minute.